It seems like increasing the minimum wage is an easy and straightforward tool to help improve the lives of those near or at the bottom of the pay scale. Well-intended folks often point to this as one of the first things we should do to narrow the wage gap. But there are some dynamics at play here that may not be fully understood by these individuals, and these dynamics can lead to some events that may be unexpected. In this video, we'll take a look at these dynamics to understand how this well-intended policy tool doesn't have the effect we are hoping for, and nonetheless why politicians use this idea to gain votes. Before we move on, it's important that we understand one of the basic dynamics of open market competition. Open market competition forces prices to remain in check. If you don't think that this is true, just think about the last time you needed gas for your car and found 4 gas stations clustered on the corners of a single intersection. How did you decide which gas station to pull into? You likely looked for the station with the lowest price per gallon. In doing so, you are indirectly forcing the other businesses on the intersection to work to get their prices lower by not doing business with them at their higher price. It is this dynamic that drives open market businesses in a capital system. It's what keeps prices down and what encourages business owners to maintain good quality at relatively low prices for consumers. The important thing to note here is that when a business owner fails to keep their prices low, they lose customers to their competitors and are thus at risk of going out of business. So now that we understand a little bit about open market competition, let's look at what happens when the minimum wage is increased. Imagine that policymakers in a particular state implemented a law to increase the minimum wage. To understand how this new law impacts the market, let's look at an example of how this might impact 2 food servers that are working for 2 separate businesses in the restaurant industry. Larry, who works at restaurant A, and Jane, who works at restaurant B, are both excited to learn about the passage of the new minimum wage law. Once the law takes effect, they will each get a 20% boost in their pay. This will make it easier for them to afford housing payments, car payments, and maybe even put a little more spending money in their pockets. How can this be a bad thing? After several weeks, the new law takes effect, and Larry and Jane are overjoyed at the thought that their labor will finally be rewarded with a larger paycheck. However, within 3 months, both Larry and Jane are out of work. How could this be? To understand how this happened, let's look at 2 common scenarios that play out for business owners when laws like this are passed. First, we'll look at a scenario where the business owners have no alternatives but to pay the increased wages. The only thing they can do to sustain their business is increase their costs by paying their servers more money. Due to the competitive nature of the restaurant business and the fact that the owners are already squeezed for profits, this results in a menu price increase and thus an increased cost to customers. This is an example of inflation, an increase in the cost of goods and services. This now impacts customers of the restaurant who will not get as much food for their money as they were prior to the law taking effect. This means that they will stop eating out as much unless and until they start to get compensated by their own employers to make up for the inflation. Once this happens, everything will be back in balance. And although everyone will be making more money, no one will be better off than they were before the wage increase because the cost of goods and services is also higher. Now let's look at a scenario where the business owners, in an attempt to keep their prices from increasing, look for alternatives to paying the higher wages mandated by the new law. Let's suppose that there is technology available for robot servers. These servers have been proven to serve tables as effectively as humans. Up until now, the cost of these units was more expensive to the owners than hiring humans to do the same work. Because of this, the business owners continued to use humans to do the work despite the availability of this technology. However, the new law that has just been passed now increases the cost of a human server by 20%. This flips the previous scenario and now puts the owners at a disadvantage should they choose to continue using human servers over robots. This is a dynamic of competitive business and not the reflection of greedy, evil business owners as many believe. As we can see from the example, ignoring business mechanics and trying to be kind by keeping your employees and paying the higher wage can be bad business decision-making that results in people losing their jobs. These scenarios were not conjured out of thin air. There are real examples of this playing out all the time. Grocery store checkout scanners, fast food self-ordering booths, and yes, believe it or not, robot waiters at restaurants are all examples of business alternatives used to reduce the cost of human staff. So why do some politicians promote raising the minimum wage as a way of reducing the wealth gap when they know full well that it doesn't really work? Many of these politicians are simply looking for your vote. They are relying on the fact that these longer-term impacts on businesses are not well understood by many Americans. And they know that for many, the law will seem like a positive step forward because it means more money in the paycheck. But let's not forget that while many of our politicians are very intelligent people, it is popularity that is the real requirement for the job.